Hello everyone, my name is Jason. Gonna learn all about it in the presentation, so let's go. I work at Nrwl, so let's start by breaking everything. Okay, everything's back. So Nrwl is a collection of Angular experts. We're founded by two of the former members of the Angular core team, Victor Slavkin and Jeff Cross. So we assembled a team of other Angular experts like me. So some of the things we do, all involving Angular, is training. So we'll go in and this is mostly for enterprises, sorry. We'll go in, we'll do workshops for you. We'll teach your developers and help them get ramped up easier with Angular. It's always the easiest to learn from the experts. So we do workshops. And then if you want some more in-depth help, you can make our team your team with consulting. So we'll work with your team. A key distinction is that our team is not your team. Like, we're not literally working for you, but we're working with your team so that they can not only deliver products better, but also learn so that in the future they can deliver products as well using Angular. So we have a lot of tools that we've created. These are made by developers, the experts, and they're for developers. NX is our monorepo tooling. This is the main topic of today. So I'll go more in-depth detail into this later. We have the Angular console, which is the UI for the Angular CLI. So, I mean, a lot of people, if they're hardcore developers or whatever, they love CLI tools and everything, but it's a lot of times easier for you to have a UI that has options for you. So you don't have to remember all the options yourself, or you don't have to go dig through ng help and the terminal to figure out what you exactly want. The last one is Nrwl Connect. This is where you can get immediate Angular support for your products. So you can go into the Angular console, give us a question, and we'll get back to you. And also give us context about your project, so you don't have to send code back and forth and stuff like that. And we'll even video chat with you while you're doing it. And then we'll go into a little bit about me. So I worked on the Angular Universal integration with Angular CLI. So I know a bit about server rendering and Node and Angular CLI. And I guess the most important part is that I work on NX. So now that we've covered what Nrwl is, we can go into NX. NX is a tool that Nrwl built on top of the Angular CLI. So you get everything that you love about the CLI, like ng-serve, ng-test, ng-generate. You get it all plus more. And what is it more? So we offer more productivity, safety, and consistency for large teams to work on Angular products together. These are teams that have hundreds, thousands of developers, and they're all making one product. So let's go into it. How do these companies that have thousands of developers all over the globe stay productive, right? Like, if you work with somebody else, you might clash and have merge conflicts, but how do these companies with thousands of developers do it? So they probably use Angular. Two of them might. Don't know about the third. But they'll probably have more than one app. They'll have like 5, 6, 20 apps, maybe. And then if you have a bunch of apps, you probably want to share code between all those apps. You don't want to write code every time for each different app. And they use something that's called a monorepo, where all of this lives inside one form of source control. So you check out the whole organization of code, and you'll use this. So we'll go into why. Like, have you seen GitHub? There's like thousands of repositories. Why do we want one repository for all of our code? Doesn't it get messy? So let's just talk about what you need to create a library if you're not using monorepos. Set up testing, set up a build system, set up TypeScript, publish it on NPM, get a CI system for it, get it on GitHub. Okay, easy, done it, takes a week, whatever, I have my library. Then you do it for everything. And, you spent like months and months on just setting up this infrastructure for every single repo. And sure, like you can copy a lot of it after you do it one time, but when things update, say if there's a new version of TypeScript, you have to go into every single one of these repos and update it. Sounds like a chore. So let's just dismiss that for now. Let's talk about dependencies. Because these repos that you created, they're not just a flat list of repos. They probably depend on one another. So the top app might depend on a library, which depends on another library. And when you decide, hey, I need to publish version 2.0 of that library, well, then one person's going to get it, but the other person's probably working on some crucial production build or whatever, and they're going to stay on version 1. And then you say, well, I bump the version of that library to 1.0, and you get the same problem. One app gets it, the other doesn't, right? And you spend weeks of just saying, hey, I updated my version, please use the latest version of something I'm building internally, right? This is like stuff that you could use for ads, or you can use for like getting your users from your database, and you have to like tell 5 different teams, hey, upgrade your dependencies. Doesn't sound like something you want for your organization to be worrying about. And how can a monorepo help, right? Like, this is just a problem we have, isn't it? Not really. So we're going to update the library at the bottom again. This is the same dependency graph. And because it's an all one repo, everything updates to the current version. And in fact, everything's always the current version. There's no versioning involved, which makes things a lot simpler. And if we talk about all the tooling again, now we have one set of tooling defined for the whole monorepo. You create a new library, it's there. You use the same set of tools, the same versions and everything, and it's just about generating the code to get there. And we'll talk about Angular. A couple months from now, version 8 will come out. It'll have awesome features, but you're probably going to have to go to all your libraries and upgrade it. With a monorepo, everything's upgraded at once. Yeah, you might run into some breaking changes, but your whole organization goes through the pain at once, rip the Band-Aid off, you're on version 8, things are good. Maybe you'll have Ivy. So now we're talking about safety and how monorepos help with safety. A lot of times when you're dealing with dependencies, one person makes a breaking change, and then you have to kind of debug, where is that breaking change from? So let's go into this library. We'll do some work on it. And so we have this dependency graph. We know that app 3 depends on the library over there. That's really all you have to worry about. The other ones are good. Don't even touch them. So let's focus in on this area. We run the test, we send it to Jenkins. It runs only this part, and it says, well, the library is good. Good job there. But the app, not doing so hot. So you know your PR is not working, and you go and fix it. All in one PR to one repo. So with large team, you don't have a lot of code. Well, you probably have a lot of code, but you also have a lot of people. And people are inconsistent. It's just the way we are. I have one set of opinions. You have another. So let's talk about 3 different things that we can use to kind of make things more consistent. So we talked about all of these different projects that you have within this monorepo. Different teams probably work on this. They probably have different opinions. But if you want to go into other people's code, that's not the best. The best way to make things consistent is if they begin consistent. So using code generation and using ngGenerate, you can generate the code for these projects, apps, libs. And not only that, but NX also provides a ton of other schematics for you to use. We'll go into some of these later, mostly the right 4, but I just want to zoom into this one, which is really cool, just workspace schematics. If our schematics don't work for you, if you don't like them, if you want to implement your own company standards, you can do that with workspace schematics. And it's using what's under the hood of CLI when you do ngGenerate. But we've made it super easy for you to write new ones that help you fit your needs. So once we've generated this code, how do we keep it consistent, right? Because you generate beautiful code, someone's going to go mess it up. Just the way it works, right? So we have a couple of linting rules that we've made in NX, which say, hey, if you're trying to depend on an app, from a library, that's a no-no. Okay? Same with tagging. So we allow you to put tags on your projects so that you know what it's intended to be used for. So if we jump into this one, it says like, hey, this state library wants to use UI. Probably not a good idea. State should not depend on UI. And these are linting rules that will fail if you push this kind of code to CI, and they'll never make it into master. And then we have code formatting. How many of you get comments on your PRs like this? White space, indentation. Like, can a computer do all this? What about this one? Spaces or tabs, guys? Which one is it? I don't care. So there's a tool out there that's called Prettier, and it makes your code beautiful. Anybody read this? Quick. What's it do when it gets destroyed? What about now? This is automatic. So Prettier is a code formatter. You can hook it up to your IDE, so that the moment you press save, it'll read your file and format it in a consistent manner throughout your whole repository, right? Not just your IDE, but everybody's in the organization, thousands of developers, get consistent formatting. And you might debate it, does that console log in the ng on init really look good? Don't worry about it. Just let Prettier do it. All right, so I'm going to go into some additional features that NX has and break everything again. Okay, so I talked a little bit about code generation from before. One of those code generations, or one of those schematics that we provide is wants to use NGRX. NGRX is a good pattern for state management. Nrwl likes it. It's pretty good for large organizations, so you don't have to maintain all these observables. So first thing, we provide some default code generation for you. NGRX can be tough to set up sometimes. So what we do is we generate everything for you at once. Actions, reducers, selectors, effects, and something that's called a facade, which I'll just gloss over for now, because it'll take a year to explain that. Advanced state management. So the hardest part of state management is not really like set this property, right? Sometimes you might have to go and fetch data, and then if you link that to a button, and a user goes, and you have like 5 bajillion calls, not a great idea. NX gives you some helpers for this. It's called data persistence. You import it via the DI. And then you also get helpers for optimistic updates, which is where your UI updates optimistically before getting data from the server. Opposite of that is pessimistic, where you really want to wait for the server to update. And then we also provide a nice helper for on navigation through your effects so that you can easily find out which actions came from navigation. So now let's talk about unit testing. Jest is a library that's created by Facebook. Facebook has a really large monorepo containing all the code, and they realized that the current tools weren't cutting it. So they created Jest. Reasons why we love Jest is that it's fast, it runs all your tests in parallel, and it's headless, so you don't have to start a browser. When you do ng test with a normal CLI, you get Karma, which brings up a browser, takes a couple seconds, and if you're doing that for a ton of code, it's going to take a long time. Headless is better for us. There's also an interactive watch mode where it watches your files for changes, and it will report like detailed diffs of what the error is. Next, there's snapshot testing. Snapshot testing is where in your test, you take a snapshot of what a variable looks like. So you store it as a string on a file, you commit that file, and that file is now in master, which is the left image here. On the right image is your new code, and you're devious or something, and you put a bug in the code. Well, snapshot testing highlights that change that's different from master. And let's say it's not a bug. That's fine. You commit those changes to the snapshot files, and it becomes the new golden file for that. So it's a good way to easily make sure that what you're expecting to happen happens without having to say, like, if query selector for a button with ID of 5 is green, right? Like, that's only one little part of the UI. Let's snapshot the whole thing and keep it as a golden file. That's about it for unit testing. Let's get into end-to-end testing. So Cypress is an end-to-end testing suite. One of the best things about Cypress is that it provides this visual UI for you to run end-to-end tests. You get the status in the top left, you get the tests that you're running on the left side, and you get your app on the right side. How often do you have to go and look in your end-to-end test, read the code, not have what's happening, and say, I still don't get what's wrong, right? Like, I don't see it in front of me. This code seems to work. Something else that's great about Cypress that's different from Protractor is that it handles waiting for things automatically. When you're doing end-to-end tests, not everything happens instantly. You might have to wait for network calls to go out or for your app to finish animating. And with Protractor, a lot of the things you'll probably be doing is like, wait 5 seconds. Okay, now test it. No more with Cypress. It also has a reload mode where the whole test suite reloads when you change your files. So if you change your application, say you fix the end-to-end test failing, everything reloads, and you don't have to do like startup Selenium and stuff like that. You don't have to do it. An awesome thing is when things work. But when they don't, you can time travel. So what Cypress does is it takes a snapshot after every action in your end-to-end test. So if you visit the home page, click a button, type your username, and you submit a form, well, there's a bug and you can't type your username. Well, it has a snapshot of what happened after you clicked that button, so you can see visually, hey, the form never appeared on the page. Something might be wrong. That's about it for Cypress. This is the most exciting part, actually, I think. I kept it for last. NX allows you to use Node within your monorepo. It wouldn't really be a monorepo if your backend wasn't also there. If you only work with front end, you'd still have a whole other team that's pushing out code that is part of your organization, and you won't really see it. So the first thing we provide in NX is a dev environment. You get all the lovely features of Angular CLI, but we've integrated it very nicely for Node. So you're allowed to do ng-serve, you get a Node app, which would be your backend, ng-build, builds your backend, ng-test, test your backend, ng-lint, lint your backend. So you're really familiar with how this works with your Angular applications already. Let's use the same thing for Node. Now let's talk about what is it like to develop all this in one repo. Doesn't that get like clustery? Like, how do I keep track of what's backend, what's front end? Will I break the backend? So what NX does and what monorepos do is that you develop Angular the same place you develop your backend. So this means that you work on both at once. If you want to change something in the backend, you do it in your local environment, and then maybe you commit the change, or maybe you tell the backend guys, hey, I tried this on my local environment, and it works. So you get to develop both at once. So that's working full stack. And then sharing code is also important. So this diagram from before, I've inserted a Node app into it. You can use the same libraries that you've broken out from your front-end code and use it on your back-end code. And this can be things like types, business logic, utility functions, or just constants, right? Like, how often do you say, hey, the backend's made a change and now I've lost my property on my user. I can't find their image anymore. Well, we go into safety. So you have all these three things working together. You have some shared libraries, you have your backend, your front end, and we use this thing called, or like you're kind of forced to use it for the monorepo, called atomic commits. You make one commit with all these three different parts, and you make sure that they move all at once. So you no longer have to kind of shout across the room and say, hey, backend's been deployed, we can deploy the front end now. You just deploy it all at once, or through one process. So now we can go through a live demo. This all sounds super duper hard, but I'll show you how you can get started. You can generate projects, can test these projects, and then I'll show you things about affected and testing again. Probably not testing again. The third one's something else. You'll have to watch to know. So, let's go into here. All right, so the first thing you want to do is you want to get NX. This is where I typo everything. Yarn global add. You can also do a global npm install. You want to install Nrwl schematics. Can everybody read this? No? Okay, too big. What about now? So this is just installing Nrwl schematics. This is NX. It's kind of confusing because it's not called NX, but we have it now, right? So we're going to create ourselves a new workspace, and this is going to be the workspace that we do everything in. 1 second. Let me just get rid of my testing one. Okay, now let's do it. So we give you create NX workspace, and what this is doing under the hood is basically ng new. The only difference is that we do it kind of super safe, where it creates a sandbox with a version of CLI and a version of NX, and it puts it together and it creates an ng new, ng nyc. It uses a collection of Nrwl schematics. You know exactly what's going on under here. It's just a little safer. So I'm able to choose a couple different options here. If you're not sure about an option, just press enter. It's okay. And now it's actually creating the workspace. So you'll see it's creating a prettier RC, which configures prettier to do code formatting. And it's also configuring an Angular JSON and stuff like that. So this actually contains no working application code from the beginning. And we'll go in and we'll create that. Grab a coffee. All right, 0 vulnerabilities. Oh, great. So we'll go into there, open it in the editor. Everybody see this for the most part? One more. So we're given this layout. As I showed in the picture, those Angular logos at the top, those are what we're going to call apps. And we also have libs, which is the shared code. So I'm going to create an app that's for this meetup. So I'm going to generate an app. Maybe not. Okay, I'm going to use the local version. Nope. Ew. Okay. Why not? So this app hopefully works. All right, so we give our application a name. This one's going to be the page that all of you see. It's going to be called events. We're just going to generate that in the normal directory. We'll give it routing. We'll use Sass, and we'll use Jest, and we'll use Cypress. And no tags for now. We'll just keep it simple. It generates some code for your app. This is basically what an ng-new app looks like. We can jump into the code and take a look. So where's this dev? Aha, okay. VS Code, always refresh. So it generates an app. It gets a Jest config instead of a Karma config. You go into the source. You have components here. This is your template file over here. Right, this is an Angular CLI app built with Nrwl NX. And we can go ahead and serve that up if this ever finishes. All right, So we have one app. Let's train another app. This one will hopefully be faster. We'll train another app. This one is going to be named Organizers. So it's an app for your lovely organizers that host this event. Doesn't need Angular routing. Let's use Sass again. Let's use Karma. Let's use Protractor. All right, now we have two apps. If we do ng serve organizers, we can open the browser once it builds. Go Webpack, go. Go Webpack, go. Okay. You get your app. Pretty simple. Pretty much what you get with the CLI. But now let's say we want to create some shared libs to use, and this lib, let's name it attendees. Yeah. This will contain all the logic that's needed for fetching attendees, showing attendees, what an attendee actually is, stuff like that. Let's just generate it normally. Yes, lots of stuff. All right. So now we have attendees. Let's revisit the source code. So we have two apps here, organizers, events, and then we have libs kind of separately as attendees, right? And we have a libs module, which is drilled down into here. So we have attendees module. How do we use attendees module? So if we go into the app module over here, this is a normal Angular module. And we can add it to the imports. Maybe. The TypeScript language service died 5 times. Okay. Attendees module, we'll import that from @ngnyc attendees. So this is a path mapping that points to your library code. And if let's go into our library and we'll generate a component. Let's generate a UI or like a attendee component, I guess. And we'll use project attendees. Okay. Same thing that you have with Angular CLI. You have an NX, don't worry. You're not choosing one, it's built on top of it. And now we have this. We'll just put some great attendee. Sure, we'll keep it as that. We've imported it here. Now in our app, is this the one I've served? I don't know. ng serve events. And we'll make a change to here. Let's forget about all of that. And what is the selector that I'm looking for? Those are tests. Sorry. App HTML. Okay. So if everything worked, we refresh the page and we have nada. Come on. Okay. What's the one thing you have to do before you use it in a different thing or a different module? You export it. Even experts make mistakes. Not saying I'm an expert. Attendee works. Hooray! So now that we've gotten it to work in one app, it's the same thing in the other app. If we want to show the same UI between two different places, we can do so easily. Now, what if we also have a backend app? Let's just create a new tab for this. somehow. Okay, so make this clear for you all. Now I can generate a Node app. We'll just call this Node app backend. Probably only have one for now. This is a pretty simple app. No directory, no tags. And now we have a backend application. Let's ng serve backend. Very familiar. Starts up Webpack under the hood, and you get a web or a Node app. Welcome to your backend. So if you're not familiar with backends, don't worry. Let's refresh this. It lives under the same directory as your other apps, since it's also an app, just not one that your users see. But they definitely use it. You go into your main.ts, we can define an attendee. Actually, let's go into attendees module, and let's generate, or let's just add a new thing. We'll make this an attendee.ts. We'll export an interface called attendee. And we'll give it a name. We'll have a string. We'll give it a, I don't know, ID of a number. So that's our attendee. We're just going to go and export that from our public API. This is stuff you can learn about if you want to dig deeper. Attendee. Now we go into our main.ts, backend source. So let's create an attendee, cause attendee is an attendee, name, Jason, ID, number 1. All right, so we need to import this. Once again, you import it much like you would import in a Node module. So we have an attendee here, and when you get the response, we're going to call .json, and we're going to return attendee. So let's go back. Ta-da! We have an attendee. This is on the back end. I wrote the type on a shared library. Let's use that type from the attendees. Let's go to app components. .ts, or not that one. Well, actually, yes, this one. Let's give this an input. We'll make this input attendee, and it has to be an attendee. Know how when I save, it just formats my code. I don't question it. Looks pretty. I don't have to worry about it anymore. In fact, I really struggle if I don't have prettier. Not happy times. So when I go into my app.component, which I'm using an attendee now, I can give my ngnyc attendee an attendee, and that's going to equal attendee. I'm not that creative right now. So now we're going to define an attendee, and for now we're just going to create an object for it. This has to be an attendee. That gets auto-imported, and this has a name of Nrwl, and his ID is number 0. Right, so we're going to pass this attendee. Note how now we're depending on attendees from 2 different places. If we go into the attendee component and give it some really nice markup, attendee JSON. So now we can see Nrwl working front end, back end, right? And instead, let's go into the module. I don't want this one. I want the app. This is for events, hopefully. Attendees module. Let's give ourselves an HTTP client. Client module. Okay. You don't know where to get this. That's okay. So we have HTTP now. If we go here and we import it, and we get a private HTTP client. Okay. Import it from here. And then we'll say the attendee is now an observable of attendee. Right, and it equals this.http.get, and it'll be from localhost 233. What's an observable? Observable comes from RxJS. Okay, and then attendee. Where get insert? No. This is going to be an attendee that comes back. We'll put that there. Go into our component. This is now async, so we will put a pipe there. And of course we get null. Why do we get null? This is still this. D component gets an attendee, shows an. Anybody? Ah, yes. So if we go into the network, we'll see that it tries to call localhost, hopefully, but it probably fails. So we just have to set up a little proxy. I always forget how this works. If you don't want to see me do it, let's skip this part for now. It'll work. You just have to do a proxy like you would with the Angular CLI and set, like, if I make a call to port 4200, direct that to my API server, which is on port 3333. Let's talk about affected. Oh, I know what the third thing is. Let's take a look at the step graph. So what it's doing now is it's analyzing your repository and it's showing all the dependencies that we just created. So we have an end-to-end suite for events. We have an end-to-end suite for organizers. Those depend on the apps that they're testing. Events and backend both depend on attendees. And I generated this from the code I have on GitHub. So whenever my CTO says, like, hey, you know, what's depending on ads right now? What's making us money? I'm like, sorry, boss. Organizers, not making us money right now. I don't have to like remember all this in my head. I don't have to put it in a diagram. In Confluence, I run yarn depth graph, and I get my dependency graph. So now that we have that, we can use that dependency graph information to run things like yarn affected test. And for now, I'm going to give some files. Most of the time, you want to do this via a base branch, such as master, and a head, which is your head commit. And it'll diff the two branches and give you a list of files that have been touched, and it'll go in and say what's been affected. So I'm just going to give it some files. Let's say I touched libs, attendee, and source lib attendees.module. That's yes. So I touched there. Let's see what gets affected. It failed. So it says testing attendees, events, and backend. Attendees, events, and a browser. Hello. So you see that it's not testing organizers. It uses the dependency information to be able to say, hey, this is our safety zone. This is what we have to retest. And it'll probably fail a lot of these tests. Yay. I had to fix a lot of tests. Right? And we can see that same information if we do yarn affected depth graph. You'll see those things highlighted in red based off of me affecting attendees. You want to know what changed when you stayed up all night and did a lot of coding? In red, that's what changed. Really useful to put in your PR saying, hey guys, I touched these modules. Please check them on your local. You can give it to QA. They can ignore organizers. They don't have to touch it. It's all there for you. And do we have more time? Are we on time? Nobody's complained yet. So one last thing I wanted to talk about NGRX. NGRX can sometimes be, let's not use that one. It doesn't like me today. All right. So it can be tough to set up sometimes. If you do ng generate NGRX, this uses the NX schematics to give you everything set up already. So let's go into our attendees. We're going to create an attendees state. This is going to go into a module, which is in our libs, attendees, source, lib, attendees, module. Spelling mistake, attendees needs a D. Is that all? That was pretty good, actually. Is this the root state of the application? No, it's only the attendees state. Would you like to add a facade? Yeah, let's take a look at what that is. So I wired all that up. If we generate NGRX again for our app state, we'll give this our module, which is apps events source app.module. That's yes. Is it the root state? Yes. This is for our application. Would you like to add a facade? No. And we'll take a look at our source code. If we look at app module.ts, we have all of this set up for us. And if we look into our attendees, we have a attendee state or a feature set up for us. And if we, let's say, run it, where am I running? That's not an app. That is not an app. That's an app. And if we go into the NGRX dev tools, we'll see that it's working. We have our initial reducers, our state will have an attendee state. I didn't actually put attendees in here, but you'll see it has a list. This is just something default that we generate for you. And if we dig into this NGRX state, we say, or let's go through the actions. We have a ton of action types, load, load error, loaded, and we go into the reducers. This is all, this is the effects. This is all generated for you. We have our facade, which we'll jump back into, and we have our reducers. And so first I want to talk about the effects. This is where all asynchronous state action happens. So you don't want this in your reducers. You want these as effects. Something that we do is we have this.data persistence.fetch. So when we have an action that actually triggers fetching of data, you can use data persistence.fetch to make sure that there's only one single request going on at once. If the user spam clicks that button, it'll cancel the previous ones and make a new one. And if we take a look at this class, we can also see there's a couple of different ones or different things we can do. Fetch is the first thing you saw. Navigation, this one reads from the router state and says, hey, something has happened in your route. Now something something has caused the app to navigate. Now I can respond based off of that. Come on, come back. We have optimistic update, and we have pessimistic update. This is stuff that you can use in your apps to avoid race conditions and all that, because it's hard. So we have that, and state should remain by itself, which means if you want to use the state from a component, one of the things you can make is a facade. A facade is a programming pattern where you put something that's simple in front of something that's actually really complex, right? But when you're interacting with this really complex thing, you have something that's nice and simple. If you want to load all of your users, you say load all. You don't have to dispatch. You don't have to look through all of the different actions that you have and say, load attendees, I want that one. This is a nice interface for you to interact with NGRX. You're defining yourself. It's just a service. And then for selectors, same thing. Keep your selectors in here so that when someone wants to know when all the attendees are loaded and wants the data, they go to the facade and call all attendees. And that under the hood gets the right selector to do all of that. So these are some of the things that NX gives you out of the box. It makes developing large applications a little bit easier. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Yes, I went into that. We generated some projects. That was actually supposed to be dependency graph. I showed it affected. I showed testing somehow. And last thing before I go, screen breaks. Follow us. Okay, so I'm on Medium, Twitter, and GitHub under @FrozenPandas. So you can follow me. I publish articles that tell you what's new in NX. So every time we make a release, I write a blog post that details what you can expect when you npm install it. I'm really breaking everything here. There's nothing special about my laptop. Nrwl NX it's on GitHub. It's all open source. If you want to find Angular console, see how that works, and hopefully contribute to it, that is at nrwl/angular-console. It's just an Angular app that runs Angular apps. But since you're all Angular developers, you can contribute. Nrwl.io on Twitter and blog.nrwl.io is where you can find articles from us. And you can join us. We have an office here in FiDi. So go to nrwl.io/careers and see if, I don't know, if you want to join. You might not. That's all. Thank you, everyone. So the question was, what's the difference between a facade and using selectors? The selectors also say, here's how I go into my state and get what I need. What a facade does is that it brings selectors closer to dispatching actions. So you don't have to go to the store and say select. And like when you get the store, this.store, you get everything. Like you get your attendee state, you get your app state, you get everything. If you use a facade, you can create different facades for your attendee state and your app state. And you can say, all right, I want my attendees facade, and I want to get all attendees. And you only get shown the functions that have to do with attendees. So it helps you organize in your components and makes it simpler to access your state. It implements a facade pattern for NGRX, but it generates it for you so that you don't have to do it.